chance to pose any questions or make any points to any of the speakers or to the panel in general. Please raise your hands. We'll try to get to everyone, but we don't have all of the time in the world. So we're going to kick off now. Gentleman in the striped t-shirt. Oh, and if you could speak loudly and clearly and keep your points quite short and clear, that would be fantastic.
This is directed to the second speaker. First of all, you didn't really specify about what we do for students to maintain a grant system. And you seem to insist on this sort of on how the disparity between wealth and poor and age and youth is having an effect on the growth of the youth. You didn't actually clarify that. So you first of all please tell me what it would do quite precisely for students to maintain the grant system and how it can change the disparity between both.
Well, I think sorry if I wasn't clear. My argument as I took stand up. So was this okay?
It's up to you. How would you
Yeah, I think what I tried to argue was that by focusing on something like AV, we distract ourselves from much deeper witness, which cause maybe young people, and particularly, and this is one that concerns me the most as chair of the Labour Club, poorer and less well educated, and also therefore minority people, and also disabled people, the very focusing and the very telling ourselves as the kind of people who end up getting much more involved in politics, telling ourselves that there's a problem with the electoral system isn't making it worse. And I won't pretend that AV will make things worse for the people who I've outlined already, being disadvantaged to our society. But by focusing on this, we aren't doing the things that those people need. So I'm not saying it makes it worse, I'm saying that we are simply sidestepping it or ignoring it or pretending that it isn't there. I hope that's clear.
Thank you. Okay, the gentleman with the glasses.
Hello. Hi. Anyone from the No campaign who care to answer. So, I'd like to pose a situation. We've got 5 candidates, split of 30, 25, 20, 20, and 50. Under the first past the post system, obviously, candidate number 1 will win. Let's say that all the voters that voted for all the other 4 candidates have a strong feeling against the first candidate. Could you tell me under what argument you would say that the first candidate has a mandate to become MP?
It's simple, and the first past the post you won. And that's the simple, clear thing about it. Now, people will go on about this, and it's not fair because most of the people voted against them. But actually with AV that doesn't change. Let's be clear about that, because people put their first preference first. So the person who gets elected isn't necessarily the person they wanted to win. Just because somebody 22 or 21 down the line happens to win, it's just somebody who was less acceptable than the rest of them. Okay? So it's a lack of clarity in that. And the tactics, as I say, came in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th preferences. So it doesn't actually show anybody anything. But what happened in Australia was very interesting, because around about the same time, in Australia and Britain in the last depression, we had very low voter turnout. Australia went to AV, Britain stayed with first past the post. Shortly after that, Australia went to compulsory voting. And they lost something magical. And that is the ability for people not to vote. Because not voting is as important as voting. It tells your politicians you're fed up with them. It actually makes your politicians, whether you're winners or losers, go out there and do something about it. That's why it makes me cross when people say votes don't count.
Can I just say that what's being proposed here is not the Australian system. The Australian system, I think, is a travesty because you have to vote for every candidate. So if in an election one of the candidates was BNP, for your vote to be valid, you would have to put the BNP as one of your options. In the British system that's being proposed, you only have to vote for candidates you want to. You don't have to vote for every candidate. And your paper isn't even sport if you put an X. So the comparison with Australia I find to be bizarre because we're not looking at adopting the Australian system in this country.
We haven't had any questions from the yes side. You guys will have your chance to reply in a moment. Does anyone have any questions for the yes campaign? Please raise your hand. Gentleman in the striped shirt.
To anyone on the yes campaign, what would you say to the argument that the AV system is less democratic because effectively the person who has voted for the least popular the least popular person who's running gets an extra vote and gets more votes the more unpopular their first vote was? Effectively, you're getting the person who's voted for effectively the wrong people getting more votes.
I don't accept that that's an extra vote at all, and I don't think that anybody who voted for any of those television shows would think that that was an extra vote at all. It's just a different way of voting. It's not more votes, it's a different way of voting. And I think that what will happen, I certainly think it's true that if AV is introduced in Britain, people will start to change the way they vote because it is a different way of voting. And they will look at preferences in a much more sophisticated manner. And just as you do in a television show, what you will be aiming at is a consensus. And in that sense, it seems to me that there is no democratic reason whatsoever why the vote shouldn't shift about until you build a consensus. Surely, as Democrats, that is really what we ought to be after. It frustrates me sometimes that there are some politicians who think that what we ought to be going for is this macho thing where I fought to get 31% compared with the others who got 29 and 24, so it's my right now to be the leader. If you work towards consensus, I see no reason why you shouldn't have that fluctuation.
This desire that you talk about, consensus, isn't one actually shared, though, by one of the big backers of the Yes campaign, the Alex Forbes Society, who actually said that AV is not suitable for electing a member of a representative body such as Parliament. I mean, that's actually a quote from them. You can find that online. They don't think AV is suitable for electing a member of Parliament because it leads to this massive beiging of candidates. And every single candidate is going to be pandering to that horrible squeezed middle. The same 200 electors in the middle are going to be fought over with the most average, the most common, the most normal, boring policies. We don't want politicians who just say the most basic, the least exciting thing. We want politicians who have exciting policies that really invigorate people. The Labour government in 1997 came up with some really exciting policies, and that's because what they didn't do. They didn't say, well, let's try and be as average as possible, and that's why Labour lost the last election. We were beige and we were average. That's where AV falls down. Politicians are boring and they are common.
Tony needs to leave, but he'd like to give one closing answer to a question.
Yeah, I just really wanted to reply to that. In first past the post, just remember the last election. Can you think of a more desultory bunch of politicians trying to occupy the same role? The fact is that we were told you could have 22 people standing. Wouldn't that be awful? No, it would be bloody great if we can shift these monolithic coalitions that are called parties who consistently do deals behind doors and we don't know anything about it. If we can get some politicians out in the open, I think that would be a great change for British democracy.
Backroom deals and AV.
Can we have some order on the speaker's table? Thank you.